This is Alex Massa, and you're listening to the Labrador Leadership Podcast with Bob Nolly.
Yes, they are.
Live from the RVA, this is the Labrador Leadership Podcast with Dr. Bob Nolly. The program that brings you the leadership skills that can make you the most authentic, approachable leader for the sake of your business, your team, and for you. Now, here's Bob.
Folks, today I want to start to put leadership in the kind of perspective of the entrepreneur here. And in terms of success, there is no one better to talk to us about that than our guest today. He has one of the top podcasts in the hyper-competitive management marketing niche and has just aired his 200th show and achieved his 3 millionth download. He runs highly sought-after coaching groups in a couple of niches and has insights into just what it takes to be successful today in the online world. Live from San Diego, Michael O'Neill, welcome to the program.
Mr. Nolly, man, thank you so much. I'm truly honored to be guest number one on the show, so thank you for that.
I wouldn't have it any other way, I was going to save this for the end, but I'll say right up front, this show would not be hitting the airwaves today if it hadn't been for all your help and the support as I headed down the road trying to figure this out. Thank you for all of that.
Well, the check's in the mail.
Checks in the mail. Yeah, one way or the other. We talk about leadership. I think one of the metaphors that comes up pretty quickly is the military or business or even sports. But you have come up with a model that I think is really important that I'd like our audience to talk about today, and that's the 8 steps. I think that is so clear in defining how you get from the start, not knowing what do you want to do in the online world, to being a leader and being successful. I think that'd be an important thing to share. And so I'd like to walk through that, at least briefly. So
sure, that sounds awesome.
Number one, you talk about finding your passion. What does that mean?
Well, even I think a preface to all of this is that we talk about leadership. It's interesting to be kind of almost thrust into a leadership role when you don't necessarily, that's not the original plan. I've seen it a bunch. People that are like in network marketing or get promoted in their job or something, and all of a sudden they're in charge of 30 people or 50 people or sometimes hundreds or thousands of people. And it's such an interesting evolution to see what happens with people's personalities in that process. And I hope we get a chance to kind of touch on that at some point during our little chat today.
I think that's important because in network marketing, at least one company that you do work with, people earn titles like generals, directors.
not generals, but executives, and we have directors and that kind of thing. And it's for those people that that are like a housewife or something for the last 15 years, and all of a sudden they're in charge of a team. It is an interesting role to be sort of thrust into, and I think people sometimes have to really step into it. But it's cool because those kinds of gigs can really teach great leadership because you're so surrounded by people that sort of went through the same thing and can shape you through these steps. And I think that's kind of where these 8 steps come from for me. Are not everybody is, out of the gates, prepared to be a leader. And it's like we have to go through boot camp to get there.
And so in the IM world, what does that boot camp look like?
Well, for me, I have such a directed point of view on that everyone can sort of achieve this. I honestly think that with some effort, that in some capacity, that even if it's a part-time gig or a side gig, that people can live a better life than they're living. Because we sort of live in this world where people are like, oh, my yearly review is up and I might get a 12-cent raise, and you're like, really? And that's what we're shooting for, is it? Or whatever it is. You know what I'm talking about? They get, $1.20 an hour raise this year. It's like, oh, that extra $30 a month is going to really crush it for you. So I just, it's like there has to be a better way. And I think if I look back at even the last 5 years when I was very intentional about learning and growing into this world of internet marketing and network marketing and creating a kind of a solopreneur lifestyle, that I can go back and trace the steps and go, I think anybody can take these things, because if I could do it, trust me that anybody can do this.
Oh, that's way too humble. That's way too humble.
It's true, but very true. Because I'm not without my faults. I'm absurdly ADD. I have, but that's okay though. It's like I'm fine with that. I don't want to tone it down or take any medicine for it. I just want to embrace it and kind of do what I do. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, I don't want to work a ton. Like I would rather live a fun life. So if I can figure out how to do what I'm doing by not working, 12-hour days now, I'm not saying that I haven't, but I think anybody can, truly. So
that's excellent. Well, let me back up even a little bit further. So when, because you lived the corporate life, at least for a short while, when did you pull the ripcord and put the brand on yourself that you were proudly unemployable? Where were you then, and what did that feel like? And,
that ripcord itself, I had already been, I was a web guy. And so I worked for companies all through the 90s and then worked for a design agency in the early 2000s. And the guy I was working for was very unscrupulous and did some stuff that by all measures was not legal. And I called him out on it, and he fired me. And then tried to withhold my unemployment insurance. And so I said, okay. And I took him to court, and he lost by a giant landslide because he was really a bad dude and did bad things. And so that was easy. But I remember thinking, man, why I'm smarter than this guy, and I'm a better human. I'm not an unscrupulous dude, but he's making way more money than I am. Why was I working for his company? So that's I think that planted the seed a little bit. And I was a freelancer for a couple of years before getting sort of recruited off the couch by a startup company. And they, it was a really cool environment when I went in there. I was employee number 65 or something. And within a year, true story, within a year, there was 350 employees. And it changed from being this really cool environment, like a hip startup, to very corporate. And somewhere in that time, I became unemployable. It was about 6 months into that engagement where I looked at this kind of middle manager that I was directly under, and she was just not leadership quality on so many different levels. And I clocked out. I mentally clocked out. I almost physically clocked out. And I think we endured each other for 6 more months before, I had the meeting. They were like, yeah, we put a severance package together for you. I'm like, oh, that's too bad. And then, I'm cheering on the way out the front door. So that was it, really. That moment was it.
And we lived happily ever after. So clearly the first gentleman you referred to was, not the greatest leader we want to hold up as an example. It sounds like the last one you mentioned wasn't ever. But did you ever work for somebody that said, yeah, I kind of like spending time here and I'm learning some stuff?
Andy Wunsch. Yeah, Andy Wunsch was my manager at REI. I worked at, which is a outdoor outfitter.
Right.
They would do camping and hiking and that kind of thing. This guy was the nicest guy, totally super friendly, really you really wanted to work hard for him. He just had that. He was very humble. He was like, hey man, how would I do this and this and this when he didn't know something? And he was like, hey, if you guys could really, buckle down and do this, just this weekend. I know it's really hard, but really he had a very sort of compassionate leadership style, and everybody wanted to crush it for him because of that. And then at the same time, I actually got fired from that job because they thought I stole some. No, it wasn't that. It was they thought I gave my employee number to a friend to buy something with my discount.
Oh.
And what I jumped on a grenade. I covered for somebody else who had done that, and I got fired for it. Actually, I think we both got fired for it. Now that I remember, and Andy and I were close. We were buds. We would ride mountain bikes outside of work, and it was not an easy thing for him to do. In fact, when he did it, he was so disappointed in me, and I felt bad. I felt so bad about it. And even after the fact, he said, dude, it's the integrity of the company. I can't do it. I can't hire you back. I know, I believe that you weren't involved in it, but I just can't do it. And I respected that, even though I was disappointed. But he was probably the best I've ever had, for sure.
So as you have moved forward, whether you were in Philly or Denver or in San Diego at that point, and moving forward and building what Solopreneur Hour is and your entire career is today, have you ever found yourself kind of looking backwards at Andy and taking some of the things that were the best from him and kind of using them for your own?
Now, I've never had that many employees he had a whole store that was under him. So he had 150 people that were essentially under him. I've never had anything like that. But I do find that my leadership style is similar. Where I am, it's definitely not like a dude, just do this. I sort of waver between let's like crush this together, and because I can be like if I feel like they're not being resourceful, that can irritate me as a leader. If they're coming to me with like really obvious questions, and I'm like, just Google the thing, or just trust your instincts on this. I don't want to be like, there's one element where I don't want to be bothered with the minutia. And I hope, sometimes I haven't been able to surround myself by the right people that won't just sort of take initiative and get stuff done. But when I do, it's amazing. And I put that on myself, that I didn't bring the right person on. Like right now I have a dude that's doing some web stuff for me. Awesome. Just, can you make this happen? And he just makes it happen. And that's like that's who I am. That's who I am as an employee. And as I think as a leader. And I always think, man, if I can figure this out, why can't you? And I realize that other people aren't wired the same way, but that's not the person I should be surrounding myself with. So I think that as a leader, you got to make sure you're surrounding yourself with the right people.
That's a great point. Michael O'Neill from the Solopreneur Hour with us today. I want to run back to the 8 steps really quickly. Number 1, find your passion. And I guess, in leadership speak, that kind of equates to creating a vision.
Yeah, and first of all, it doesn't sound like this is episode 1, Bob. You're like a seasoned pro. I think that piece of it, at least in my case, I was doing some things. I'd been in the web world, the design world, the branding world for many years, which I loved. And then at some point, I didn't love one big part of it, which was working with clients. And it's like, all right, well, that's hard. That's hard to make a career of doing this for people when you don't really want to work with people that much in that capacity. And not because I don't think there are great clients to work with, but even the people that I know that are still amazing at this stuff, way better than I ever was, have such struggles with that side of it. And it's like, in a perfect world, someone would hand us money and then go away for 8 weeks and let us just do what we do. But that's not how it works, because at least in the design world, nobody's a designer until they hire a designer. Then everybody's a designer. And that's very difficult to work within those parameters. Yeah. And it's almost unique to that industry. It's like it's like if you hired someone to do a jingle for you, then all of a sudden you're like, I'm a songwriter and I'm going to show you how to write your songs. And it's like, man, what part did you hire me for? So for me, the passion part I didn't discover until after all that. I was sort of on this journey. I went to a network marketing company. Within that company, I did well because I was good at social media. And so good, in fact, that the company said, hey, would you be willing to train people to do that, to build their business with social media? So we did this like 17-city tour where I was on stage or in private workshops teaching people. And I'd always loved to teach my friends how to snowboard. I taught women's mountain bike clinics for a while in Colorado. And I loved the teaching part. Like, it was really something I enjoyed, but I never thought, well, I want to be a teacher, right? And I didn't know the other avenues available to me to sort of transmit information. I knew I didn't want to go be a snowboard instructor or a mountain bike coach because, there's no money in that. And even when I was doing it, I didn't think about how could I scale this? How could I make this into a thing? And it wasn't until I met someone and I was speaking on stage a lot that I was like, wow, I could really do this part. I love this kind of stage time. It's my inner show off comes out a little bit, but I'm also good at articulating and helping people learn things. And I think there would be something there. And that was before, podcasting was kind of a glimmer in my eye,
Sure. And, go ahead.
Sorry, I have to take cough breaks every couple seconds. It's like this. It's a little joke where the universe decided that because I was going to be on a microphone a lot, that it would just make me cough all the time, and I can't. After a billion doctor visits, can't figure out why we're still coughing. So, anyway.
If you're ever here in the South, the universal antidote for that cough is bourbon and honey.
All right, well, I'm going to go get some bourbon and honey.
Yeah.
I should have just done that. I should do that for every episode. Then I would have the alcoholicpreneur.
The show would be different.
Yeah, it would be decidedly explicit content. I'm sure would be the first thing that would happen. Anyway, so I found this. My brain was not on the marquee yet. My brain was still in this very supporting role because I was a drummer and I'd spent all this time, around sound equipment. I had microphones and things like that around. I had seen somebody else, because of my mentality, being a drummer, which is of a supporting cast member. It's not like you're not in the spotlight. You're kind of hiding behind metal and wood.
Whoa, wait. That's not the way I ever saw that. I always thought the drummer was driving the bus.
That's the secret. Here's the deal. The drummer is the most important person in the band, but in terms of where we are on stage, we're buried in the back. We're behind we're sort of hiding in the corner. But you can get a great band with a bad drummer, and they sound like a terrible band.
Right?
And then vice versa. You can have an okay band. There's a lot of okay bands with great drummers that sound amazing. So it's like, and then we also secretly know that we could, at any given, we have our hand on the button at all times. So we can take the ship down at any time we want to, which is there's a good ego power involved in that.
Yeah,
and of course,
all the times
girls.
I've seen Springsteen, I spend more time watching Max Weinberg than I do just about anybody else.
Sure, and the smart girls know to date the drummers. That's it. That's really the important part. So, anyway, so the point is that no matter what you want to do, like if I'm the drummer for Sarah Bareilles or John Mayer or something, I'm not the star on that stage. So I have to be. Even though I know technically I'm in the driver's seat, and they know it as well. Don't think they don't know that I'm not. I can't just be like doing drum solos every song, right? So I have to be in this supporting role. So that's where my brain is, and I recommended to a guy that I'd seen speak on stage that he should do a podcast, and he said, "What's a podcast?" And I was like, "Well, it's like a radio show, and you download it on your phone." And so we did it. It was very successful. And when he was out of town one day, I had to fill in and do a show. And it was like all of this other training, all the music stuff, being in front of a microphone, all the schooling I did on stage, all the listening I had done to like Howard Stern and all these like really great interviewers throughout my life, all of a sudden culminated in this 45-minute episode. And I was like, that was cool. Like I was good at that. And it felt right to me. That felt like something I should be doing. And that really planted the seed. And, if I didn't love it so much, I wouldn't have done 9 hours of editing on episode 200 or gotten up, really early to do a show one day or stayed up really late to do a show. I had to love it, love it, love it. And I do. So I think that if you find your actual passion, the thing that you really love to do, that hopefully you can make money doing, then it's enough driving force to keep you going when things, really when the ass hits the fan and you really have to step in and do a lot more work than you normally do. Because if you don't have that passion for it, there's no way you're going to step in and do it.
Yep. And you'll burn yourself out sooner, probably more than later at some point. So when you one of the quotes you've said kind of fits right in, of course, to the 8, and immersing yourself in the culture to dive in and seeking knowledge. And that's this: environment is much more important than willpower.
Yeah, that's very true. It is it's amazing how we almost handcuff ourselves by putting ourselves in really bad situations. Like we're in, good example. I started the show, which was August 2013. At the time, I was living in a particular area of San Diego that had like hippies and burnouts and surfers. It was like, which is fine. Like if you are a surfer and that's your life and you want to just go out kind of party and surf in the morning, that is the destination for you. The housing's pretty cheap. You can do it. It's great. But as someone who has like an entrepreneur brain, it was really hard for me. I lived with a kind of a burnout kind of dude as a roommate. The house wasn't great. It was, so my area wasn't great. The house wasn't great. My roommate wasn't great. It was all like really dragging me down, despite having my initiative and my drive to become successful. There was almost nowhere I could go to be surrounded by people that felt the same way I did. And I'm like, I have to get out of here. And it was almost like the minute I left, things went on a massive upswing for me. And I'm not even kidding. It was like the minute I got out of that environment and got to a place where I actually ended up kind of up-leveling and getting a place more expensive than I'd never paid before, but in exactly the right town, right where I wanted to live, in a great place, in a great location within the place, living by myself, and all of a sudden, everything starts rolling in my direction. And that's because I was a product of my environment. And I think if people are still stuck either in bad relationships or bad locations, whether you live somewhere that you don't like, there's no real excuse for it. Because, I talk about having location freedom, and I think that ties into the environment that you're in. And it could be a bad relationship. It could be a bad friendship. We talk about the 5 people, the whole Jim Rohn quote, 5 people that you surround yourself with. You're the product of all of them. So, surround yourself with great, amazing people. And by the way, you are one of the 5. That internal monologue you have to yourself is one of those 5 people that you're surrounding yourself with. And that was a huge breakthrough for me to hear that from someone and go, wait a second. Think about how many people every day go through this process of, oh, you're not good enough. There's no way you can do what these people do. You've got to do this for blah, blah, blah. You put 90 people before you. And that's not, you go person to the millionaire, how they run their life. And they have a really great internal dialogue. They're positive. They're positive people. So they surround themselves with positivity in a great work environment, in a great relationship environment. I always tell people that if you have the time freedom and you can go work from anywhere you want, don't just stay at home. Don't do that. Go out and, go to a coffee shop. But by the way, don't do it at a coffee shop that's in the crappy part of town. Go to the nicest subdivision where you live and go to that Starbucks, or go to the nicest hotel bar in your city and plop your laptop up on the counter, get a glass of wine, and get the Wi-Fi password from the bartender and do a little work. Because everybody that comes around you is going to be successful. Otherwise, they wouldn't be at that hotel in the first place.
And it's so great when they step up and ask you, what are you doing there?
Yeah, why are you working? What are you doing? And you're like, hey, this is what I do. And all of a sudden, you're like, hey, you know what? We're having a get together, for entrepreneurs next Saturday. Do you want to come? Yeah, I do. And now all of a sudden, instead of like being at a, fundraiser for the local, whatever shelter, you're at this like amazing, charity event where now there's millions and they're putting shelters up. And it's like, okay.
Oh, excellent. You're listening to the Labrador Leadership Podcast. We have Michael O'Neill from the Solopreneur Hour today. Michael, all the people you have worked with as a coach, of all the clients you've worked with, what is the biggest differentiator that you see between those that are successful and those that are, just not quite as successful as they hope to be? I lost you?
Yeah, there we are. Hey, bud.
Okay, we're back. Okay, good. So what is the biggest differentiator that you see between your clients that are really successful and those that are not quite as successful as they want to be?
Honestly, it really breaks down into them taking action. I know so many people that are consummate learners. They've taken everybody's course and 50 times, and they have everything. They know more than I do about most of the stuff. They're like, oh yeah, I did this, and I set this thing up, and I got this funnel in place, and I did this, and set this sales page up, and I've got the course all done. It's 50 chapters. Each video is 3 hours long. I'm like, holy moly! Okay, what's the issue? Like, how? What's the problem? So I think that it's the failure to launch situation that happens, and that's difficult. I think that's a difficult thing to overcome. I think it can be fixed by coaching. I think having a coaching program of some sort for someone to look at your body of work and go, oh yeah, that's enough. You got it.
Yeah, I think that crisis of confidence that they can have is so critical, and it can be overcome. Why are people so reticent about getting a coach?
It's really weird. I'll tell you. Well, I don't know. I think we don't even know that that's a thing. I think a lot of people don't even know that's a thing yet. People outside of this space of kind of internet marketing and in that kind of, solopreneurship, I don't know that they know that coaching is a thing. And you think it would be obvious because they don't know if anybody's into any sport. You've never seen anybody win anything that doesn't have a coach. It's like they just don't. Or if you have, it's like the unicorn of athletes that doesn't have some kind of coach that has gotten that far on their own. But yeah, so I don't know. That part I don't get. I think in the business world, if they could all be Andys, right? And go, yeah, teach me the thing I don't know how to do. And it just makes them even a better leader, a better coach, and a better student. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know why they're so reticent to do it, but they certainly are. And if there's one big piece of advice that I can give anybody, it is absolutely get into some kind of coaching program in 2015. Just stop making excuses for it and just go do it. They're not all that expensive. They're $99 a month, or they're what's SoloLab now? $130 a month,
right?
Or so. And there's tons of them, and I'm probably the least expensive of all of them. So it's like there's tons of them out there, and sometimes all you need is someone to look at you and go, "Oh yeah, that's enough. You got it, baby. Go ahead, pull the trigger." And that gives you the inspiration and the confidence to do it.
And overcoming that crisis of confidence is probably the big reason to find a coach. Otherwise, you'll just keep buying classes and packages and plugins and data collect. Do I have to decide yet? Do I have to launch it? No.
Right. Well, I don't. Well, but the thing is, it makes you feel like you're making progress. And in some senses, you are, because you are. You're adding to the base, right? But it's almost like if in old video games, you could put like a cheat code in, and it would be God mode.
Right.
You could just like not die, and you'd have unlimited ammo, and it's like. And meanwhile, they're throwing like spears at you, and you've got tanks, and it's like, yeah, you got it. You've got enough. And I have a good friend of mine that is like that. He has been, working on The Dream for 8 or 9 years, and it's going okay. He's manifesting it in a different way, but man, he was so poised for success 7-8 years ago. Like he could have launched, and it would have taken his life and his career on a completely different and very successful path. You just never know. You never know.
You just never know. Pull the trigger. 2015 will be your year. Just a couple more things I want to ask you really quickly here. What's on your iPod right now?
My iPod is mostly, well, let's see. Almost all the music I have has a good drummer, obviously. And most of my life is streaming Pandora comedy, different comedy stations on Pandora, or some kind of electronica, like ambient, no lyrics type music from Songza. So that's what, by the way, you should probably update to like what's on your iPhone, because I don't think people even use iPods anymore. And then for my own music, it is very like, what have I listened to on my own? I'm trying to think. Most recently, I listened to Dave Weckl, who's came from sort of being a jazz drummer and has the Dave Weckl Band, which is sort of electric jazz music.
I love that songs that you've turned me on to that. That's very useful for getting stuff done.
Yeah. And otherwise it's like filthy funk is what I listen to on my my iPod.
What
like bands like Lettuce, or Lettuce or Tower of Power, or who else am I listening to? John McLaughlin, Tom Scott, Dave Weckl.
When I was in school, I was the guy that was charged with booking the bands into the fraternity house all the time.
Oh, nice.
And you remember the movie Animal House? Just plug me in there.
Of course.
Not really. Yeah. I never got Otis Day in the nights. But I did always book a band every semester in there that just, turned me on to bands that I never heard of, like the Meters.
Oh man, the Meters. I mean, there you go.
And if I hadn't heard that, I'd never heard of them. I would have never. And actually, Little Feet. I'd have never heard of Little Feet.
Oh yeah, sure. So, but yeah, Zigaboo on the Zigaboo from the Meters is just a filth bomb of a drummer.
Oh, it's awesome.
He's great. He's got some nasty funk happening up in that.
All good stuff.
New Orleans style. It's good stuff.
All right, so you'll have to come back. You'll have to come back later in the live show and talk to us about comedy, because I didn't get to that.
Is this it?
And we only do half an hour, man.
Oh, let's talk about comedy. Come on, Bob. Let's break format. Episode 1.
Okay. All right. Here we go. You're a huge fan of comedy, and more. In addition to just sitting there and enjoying it and having your favorites, you're kind of quite a student of it, I believe.
Yeah, I study it. Big time. I really, really study it.
So
it is a master class in setting a premise of an idea, getting an audience to buy into a premise, and then almost going for the sale, which is the punchline of the joke. If you can see, I talk about this one in particular, that Louis C.K. has, I think it's at the beginning of Hilarious, his hilarious routine, where he tells a sort of semi-racist, anti-Semitic type joke, at least a Holocaust joke. 1 minute and 30 seconds, or 1 minute, I think it's 1 minute and 47 seconds into his act, and it's with a cold audience, meaning that there's no opener. He just starts going, and he takes this 3,000 people through 3 different energy shifts before he hits the punchline. And I think it might be 247 before he hits this punchline. And it is a masterclass, in kind of ballsy beginning, like, holy, I can't believe he's going for this kind of thing. And how to sort of tap dance through laser beams or crocodiles and do it in a funny way that you go, whoa. And from the kind of like the meta outside technical standpoint, you go, whoa, that was such a pro move that no beginner stand-up would ever go for. Like, that was such a high-level Michael Jordan opening that this guy just did. And I love that stuff.
Totally awesome.
Yeah, I love it. It's phenomenal. And you look at some of these guys like Anthony Jeselnik, who has, if you guys Google Anthony Jeselnik and just YouTube him a couple times, his comedy is so off the rails, not like wacky, but in this, like, he leads you down this path, and his whole thing is leading you down a little story, then dropping the most fierce bomb on you as the punchline. And you have no idea where he's going with it, which is why it's fascinating. And then he'll drop this joke, which is usually highly offensive. And you go, wow, I didn't see that coming. He just blindsides you every time. And it's brilliant. But I was thinking of him as an opener, like coming up. And I go, how would you have the balls to do that? Because no one it's one thing if people go to see you as a comedian. It's another thing if you're just the opener and you have such an unconventional style, which he totally does. And that is the fiercest. It's one thing to stand in front of an audience and another thing to try to make them laugh. But it's some of the scariest, ballsiest comedy I've ever seen from this guy.
I'll link both them up in the show notes. Everybody take a break and go check them out for sure. So has comedy changed since the late 20th century heyday of like Carlin and Robin Williams?
Well, you picked 2 that were very ahead of their time. Yes. I mean, there used to be applause breaks, in comedy. Yeah. They used to be, they would sort of stop, and I don't know that those exist as much. They kind of go right through there. I think that sort of hacky comedy is still very sort of 80s based. and early 90s. I think some of the really smarter stuff that kind of like David Cross was one of the guys that started that trend of being like, and Dennis Miller, when he was doing a lot of stand-up, was sort of out there.
Oh, yeah.
But very, very smart. Jay Leno used to be a lights out, lights out stand-up.
The first comics I started hearing, were on this, of course, going to date myself, which is no secret, on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Oh,
Those guys that were in there in the evening. I'm thinking of somebody like Jackie Vernon. He had a little cricket, a little clicker in his hand, and his whole shtick was he was showing you a slideshow, walk you through the slideshow of his vacation, and just the timing and the deadpan, almost like a Stephen Wright kind of thing.
Yes.
And my parents were just appalled that I would go, I want to be like him.
Yeah, and Stephen Wright is that Anthony Jeselnik is very Stephen Wright-esque with maybe a filthier back end to his jokes, but really cool, like a really cool idea. But yeah, so I think it's, again, if we're bringing it back to leadership, those people have to command audiences of hundreds and thousands of people, and to pull yourself away and examine how they do that. And if you consider that whatever the concept is you're trying to describe to your team, if that's your premise, and that's every comedian has a premise. When you hear someone like Chris Rock, his premise is very obvious. Women can't go down in lifestyle. They can't. They can't go down in lifestyle. Like that's and he has to keep repeating that. And then he hits you with 7 jokes that are related to that premise. So that's how he sort of nails it, right? Other comedians do that in different ways. And they do it just like a lawyer would, where they'll say something like, so do you believe that blah, 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 blah? And they're like, oh, yeah. And what about blah, 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 blah? And then he goes, yeah, then blah, 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 blah. And then that's the punchline for a lawyer. So for us as leaders, we have to set the stage for the people that are learning from us to say, all right, and we did it a little earlier today. Say, okay, so if you believe that confidence and the failure to launch is the number one. Can I get you to agree, Bob, that confidence and the failure to launch is the number one problem with most leaders or most would-be entrepreneurs?
Absolutely.
And do you believe that an outside influence, someone who's successful, that's able to recognize that, do you believe that someone like that looking at their body of work is important?
Absolutely.
Right. So the punchline to this is get a coach, right? Then coaching is obviously the number one reason why people will become successful in 2015. So that's how, in the comedy world, that sets up what we do in the leadership world. And it's exactly that, to say, what are you struggling with? Okay, blah, blah, blah. Well, would you agree that if you're struggling with this, that this might be a good form of action to take? Yeah, that seems like a good idea. Okay, so consequently, this course is $500 and answers everything you just said, or whatever, however that needs to work. But it precisely an exact one-to-one mirror for what comedians do, for what we have to do as leaders.
And I think the most successful entrepreneurs today that are trying to get that very thing done are the ones, I mean, what is the first old tired axiom, the money's in the list. And then now
right.
Now you have to create a relationship. Well, the ones that can get closest to the edge, I mean, in this age of social media, people are just craving a relationship,
yes.
A quality relationship. And when you have thousands, millions of downloads, or hundreds of customers or group coaching clients, the closest you can get to that gap right at the edge where you could create a great relationship with them, you got a client and a fan for life.
That's true. I will say one thing. I just had this coaching call. Actually, it was a live engagement, but it was. We see these people, at least in the internet marketing world, the Chris Duckers of the world, the John Lee Dumases, the Pat Flynn's, and I'm not sure if that's your audience specifically, Bob, so you can correct me and fill in whatever name,
Sure.
would be appropriate. But we have this thing, and again, I can speak as a solopreneur. I can't speak as, someone who's running a company of 5,000 people, because that's not what I aspire to do. But we feel like we have to instantly set up our lives like these guys tell us to, meaning, get your VA, get your virtual assistants in place, get your, your scheduling all done, and do your mass emails, and then you have like an autoresponder that does this, and everything's arm's length to me. And I was talking to this particular person. I said, look, if you have more time than money, you have time to connect with your audience one person at a time. If you have a coaching program you're trying to bring people into, then your only marketing plan should be getting on a Skype call with them for 15 minutes to see if you guys are a good fit with each other. And then you just let your actual conversation sell the coaching program.
It doesn't even have to be that hard. You can just roll through the phone numbers and call them, even if you miss them, and leave them a message.
That's
and
right.
Just go, I just hadn't heard from you. I want to know how things are going. I know you were working on this, and let me know what I can do for you.
Figure out how they would have done business in the 40s and do that, because what it takes to become someone who earns six figures in this environment is 200 people paying $500 each. That's not a lot. That's not like if you spread that out throughout the course of a year, that's not that many people.
No.
It's like, dude, you can definitely do that. And how hard would it be to, I don't know how many people that is, but how hard is it to talk to 15 people a month or 20 people a month or whatever it is, right? It's like a person or two a day, or it's not that hard. So point is, we don't have to overcomplicate it. We can still do business like they did in the 40s, but it can have a modern spin. Once you get too busy because you have too many people that are calling you, and there's, you don't have enough time because you're coaching so many people, then yeah, I guess you can start automating things, but you don't have to hurry that up.
Yeah, but not until then. Yeah. That's great.
Agreed.
What else can we solve?
Dude, we can solve world hunger right now. What do you want to do?
Let's do that in episode 2. We'll have to put hunger on episode 2. Okay,
all right,
that's good.
well, if you insist.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have listened to episode 1, and it will always be episode 1 of the Labrador Leadership Podcast. It's going to be the highlight of the day for sure. Michael, where can folks find you?
Uno, baby. They can find anything that I do. I was going to try to be cheeky, but I'm not going to. You can go to Solo Hour, solohour.com, or at Solo Hour on Twitter if you guys want a high five.
At Solo Hour on Twitter, at solopreneur.com. Michael, thank you very much. We wouldn't be here without you. Come back anytime.
I will. I'm going to be here for episode 3, 4, and 5.
Every Thursday, folks.
Thanks,
Have a
Bob.
great weekend, sir. Happy holidays.
Thanks for listening to the Labrador Leadership Podcast. For the sake of all the special people in your life that deserve you to be the best leader you can be. Connect with us on our website at labradorleadership.com, on Facebook at Labrador Leadership, and on Twitter at Lab Leadership. Now, here's a final thought from Bob.
Okay, folks, you can check out our show notes at labradorleadership.com/1. And Michael O'Neill, thank you very much for joining us here on episode 1. It was a great one. Next time, Alex is back and we talk about setting goals.